I'll start by introducing myself. I'm a forester. I've studied here in Lisbon, and I've worked in many different subjects. But since 2011, I am the coordinator of the Portuguese NFI, the National Forest Inventory. That's the main topic of this presentation. I'll be showing you how in Portugal we are collecting the biophysical data that's afterwards used for processing the indexes for desertification and many other purposes. This NFI system is being developed as an integrated system that can be used for many purposes, and desertification monitoring or semi-arid monitoring is one of those purposes. This has the advantage of every information that's collected can be interrelated between processes without the errors that occur in different definitions, different approaches, and so on. We don't have a mouse? No. So I have to speak here. I'll start by a short overview of the Portuguese National Forest Inventory. No. I don't know how aware are you about this type of process, but basically nowadays most of EU countries have a national forest inventory. Worldwide is also a more and more common approach at national level. And I'll start by a brief description of the one that's done in Portugal. In Portugal, this public service of producing information on forest resource assessment is the responsibility of the Institute for Nature Conservation and Forests. It's a new institute. It's been established 2 years ago. It's the result of a fusion process of the Conservation Institute and the National Forest Authority, and now it's become a new organization. The NFI started in Portugal in 1963. Portugal is among the second group of countries in the world to have a formal NFI process, and since then has been going on a continuous basis. The NFI mission is the supply of updated statistical and basic cartography information regarding, can't be read, but it's abundance, status, and condition of the forest resources. Here, forest resource in a very broad sense. We take care of many, many aspects. The main goal of this research, if we can frame everything into one purpose, it's the sustainable management, it's the definition of politics, the sustainable management of our country natural resources. The history of the inventories goes like this. We are presently at NFI 6, the 6th National Forest Inventory. That's the year of reference is 2010. But still ongoing. It started in 1965, as I've mentioned, and then we have already done 4 inventories. Now it's the plus 5. Now we are on the 6th one. Until 2005, there was an inventory cycle of 10 years. Every 10 years there was a new remeasurement of all the parameters. But with this NFI 6, we initiated a shortened period of 5 years, and we want to get even more precise information on that matter. A continuous forest inventory system is being underdeveloped, so that using remote sensing data, the project basis of the areas that have been afforested can be all integrated in one system, and we can update statistics on an year or annually or biannual periods. NFI users. Well, it has a lot of utilities, all this information. The main one are government and public administration. It's the basis for the definition of all forest-related policies, and desertification and biodiversity and so on. It's also the information that's used by private timber and non-wood forest products like cork, resin, etc. companies. The industry use this data for their strategic and management planning. It's the source of information for forest health and desertification monitoring, for the forest certification schemes. It's also widely used on research and for teaching purposes, and it's information also available for the general public. That's at national level. At EU and international level, basically the system now is developed to accommodate the reporting process of the 3 Rio Conventions. We produce information that is used at national level for these 3 conventions: the climate change one, the desertification, and the biodiversity convention. It's also the source of information for Eurostat, for the National Accounts on Forests, or for FAO, and for the European forest mechanisms on forests and so on. Well, that was the short overview. I'll go in more detail what data do we collect and how things are organized, and later on I'll show you what results we obtained from this process. So NFI6. Okay. That's okay. NFI6 is organized in 3 phases. The phase 1, that's the land use, land cover, evaluation and monitoring. In this NFI6, we had to go back to the other forest inventories to build a comprehensive database on this subject, and I'll show you that in a minute. And I think it's an interesting approach, essentially for monitoring purposes. This was a request essentially for climate change reporting, that we had to have a fully compatible and integrated system for monitoring forest change across the periods of the Kyoto Protocol. But it has many uses, and it's information that's very, very interesting to analyze in a monitoring perspective. The phase 2 are the forest characterization and biodiversity. That's field work that's done in the field, and it's the process that's starting now. And the third phase is the soil carbon evaluation, also in the field, collecting samples, and then laboratory for processing those samples. You can see, but there's, say, completed 2014 and 2015. That's the estimated date of conclusion. The Portuguese NFI is fully based on sample-based methods. It's a sampling procedure for every subject, including land cover. For that, we have established a national sampling grid that's 500 meters by 500 meters, north, south, east, west. And that results in 360,000 points. That covers the entire country. These 365, it is 500 meters by 500 meters. These 350,000 points are used for land cover sampling. From that sample, we take a subsample of 2,000 points that are field visit for collecting the forest characteristics, not only forests, but also shrubland areas, what we call in Portugal the forest space, not only the areas that are with trees, but all the other areas that can be considered as natural spaces. And then there's another sample of 600 points that are used for collecting data on soils. Phase 1. It's done on those 360,000 sample points that I've mentioned that are classified by aerial photo interpretation and complemented by field verification. There are some land use classes that cannot be identified in aerial photo direct. New plantations, you know there's a new plantation, but you don't know which species is there, so you have to go to the field and check which species you have to allocate to classify to that point. This classification process is guided by two reference documents. The first one is a land use, land cover nomenclature that's been defined, and I'll show you in a minute. And the photo interpretation and classification procedure manual. So we have standardized all the procedures that has to be used for classification so that we can reduce the subjectivity of this process, the better that we can. And that's used for the photo interpreters. The whole data production undergoes a formal quality control and quality assurance process that entails many steps, or a couple of them. One of them is the mandatory training and accreditation of all photo interpreters. So people who do this work, that's a work, I didn't mention that, but it's that as an external service provider. It's not done by the Portuguese Forest Service. It's a public procurement process. So the private companies that apply for these calls, but then the training is developed by us, by the ICNF, that teach the photo interpreters how to classify everything and how to decide when one class should apply or the another, or, well, a lot of process. That is done on a web-based platform. Everything, the photo interpreters can work everywhere in a country, but they have access to a fully developed site for this purpose, where they do this classification over the aerial photographs. We have a glimpse of that I'll show you. The points that are classified are ground control, 5% of them. There's another contractor, third party, that verifies, and then it goes in the field and check the classification if it's correct. And then we can use that on Office for making the validation of the information. We have also on-the-fly audits to the contractors, so the ICNF technicians go in the field to check if the field teams are following all the procedures that have been defined, if they are making any mistakes. The strategy is to minimize errors along the process. We don't want to find in the end what the error is. That's not the important issue. The most important is to minimize it on the fly, I think, as the process is going on. Nevertheless, in the end, we have a product approval process where we compare the photo interpret data with the ground control data, and we have an index of compliance that has to be verified so that we can pay the check and say it's okay, we accept the data. The nomenclature that I've mentioned previously, it's a process that's very important, and it has links with many indicators. Sometimes when we talk about forests, we think we are all thinking about the same thing, but we are not. These things now have a very clear definition. It's a definition stabilized at the international level. And it's important that all this process, desertification, carbon evaluation for climate change, biodiversity, use a common definition. Otherwise, you can draw completely different conclusions that stem from these problems about definitions. Another issue is also in-house problem, or a country in-house problem. That's to harmonize it at different institution levels, because everybody tends to also to make some definitions. I call agriculture this thing, you call other aspects. I include olive trees, you don't include olive trees, and we have made a large effort to harmonize this information and to come to a nomenclature definition that's not fully harmonized, but it's a lot better than it was in the beginning. This is the aspect of that nomenclature. I won't go into much detail, but just to show you that we have divided it in 3 groups. We have first land use, where we have 6 classes. The inland waters, forest areas, shrubs and grasslands, settlements, unproductive land, and croplands, agricultural lands. That's basically the structure of UNFCCC for climate change, but it can be applied, and for us it was not difficult to adapt the classification that was used in Portugal to this type of structure. We then go in more detail, of course, on forest areas, where we go to identify 3 groups: species composition, tree cover, and also at level of croplands. Croplands, we identify the major types of croplands in Portugal. And it's important because it's a way to get the fully compatible land use land cover information. In previous times, NFI only focused its attention on forests, and then there was, when we go to the statistics on agriculture areas, things weren't compatible. This way we have a systematic approach for these procedures. We then also collect some information on dimension and fragmentation of the patches. That's then used for landscape analysis, and we can have a fully characterization based on point sampling. That's just point sampling that we're talking about. Just here to give you an idea about the issue that we are talking about, what is a forest? Forest has some parameters and thresholds that have been defined. I don't know if you are all aware of it, but I think that this showing you can clarify what I was talking about. Where we call it, there's an area parameter that has to be larger than half an hectare. There's a width parameter for the patch that has to have at least 20 meters width. A canopy cover for the trees that must be up 10%. That's very important in Mediterranean countries, this 10%, because we have very sparse vegetation, and if you use 10% or use 30%, you have completely different statistics about forests. Just changing this type of parameter. This 10% allows us in Portugal to include most of our stands of cork oaks and holm oaks. Otherwise, most of them would be not considered forests. And there's also a parameter regarding to tree height, and it's not as strict as the previous ones, because, well, we said that trees should be 5 meters height, but it's not said that at that precise moment they have 5 meters, because forests are cut, there's new plantations, they must have is the possibility to reach that 5 meters height at maturity. So it's not a land cover classification in strict sense, but because it has also this type of subjective analysis on the subjective or interpretation analysis on the classification. The classification of points is done this way. We have that grid that covers the entire country. This is just an example. It's then overlapped over the aerial ortho images. 1995, 2005, 2010, we have made a stack of images that have been fully integrated, georeference, core register, whatever, so that when you pin a point on top of that stack, you get the same, exact same position for the 3 years. From that, we get the classified photo points using that nomenclature that we have defined previously. That can afterwards be correlated with the ancillary information, namely land cover cartography from the 90s or burned areas mapping. And then we go to the final classification. This is a general overview of the graphical user interface of the web-based platform that we use for doing this purpose. So this is a WMS system where images are provided for the photo interpreters. They have here a tab for 1995, 2005, 2010. This is the classification, and then they just have drop-down lists so that everything sticks to the nomenclature that's defined. Here you can change the ortho image in false color, true color for the years, and you do this simultaneously for this year so that everything can be completely comparable. From that information, I can show you some preliminary results. There's also a way to make you a glimpse of how is Portugal forests. Almost 9 million hectares country. Forest land represents 35% of this area. Croplands, agriculture areas, 24%. And we have many areas that are occupied by shrubs, lands, and grasslands. You see that, and that's very common in the desertification areas. Then the other subjects. Since we have this multi-time or multi-annual imagery, we can look at the changes that occur in this period. And we can detect here that forest lands have decreased its area by 4.6% from 1995 to 2010. Croplands have also decreased the areas, and shrubs and grasslands have increased. That's the trend. Nevertheless, here when we talk about forests, we are including also the temporary unstocked areas. In forest areas, we include forest stands and areas that have been clear-cut or have burned areas and things like that. And in terms of forest stands, that the area that has really trees on top of it, that's more stable and even a slight increase. Where we have is a lot of areas that disappear in consequence of forest fires, essentially. Another important thing to notice here is the very dramatic improvement or increase in the settlement areas. We are talking about cities, roads, wherever that has 20 meters width. That corresponds to a period where these infrastructures in Portugal have had a large development, and that is also depicted in the information. That results in a land use conversion rate that's one land use that changed to another land use of 1,000 hectares per year. That's an incredible dynamic system. And forest area is decreasing at 0.3% per year. That's the mean value of this 4.6 divided by 15 years. From that point sampling, we can also produce this type of graphical information. What we see here are just the points with colors. There's no transformation of that data. You miss some colors here, but basically forest lands are around here. You don't see that much, but they are here. I can see in my graph, and then, well, this is not so yellow as you see here. There's a crescent here that's basically forest areas. Combining or differentiating the two periods, we can then produce afforestation maps where we can see where there's an increase of forest areas. They have, in this period, they have been concentrated around here is the Serra da Estrela. It's the top, the highest mountain in Portugal, and around it there's a lot of development. That's basically eucalyptus. But here in the south, near Mertla, where you will be visiting, there's also a very significant increase in forest areas, and basically is stone pine forests that have been subsidized essentially for protection purposes. And they are there. You probably will see that on your field trip. And that is one significant change in this very desertification-prone area. If we have afforestation, of course, we can also compute deforestation. Deforestation is basically concentrated here. Well, it's scattered all over this map. You don't see it here because of the projector. It's not very clear. But the hot spots are here. That's forest fires areas. And here in the Algarve, Serra de Monchique, that have been had a lot of forest fires. So basically here in this Serra do Algarve region, we have a shift of forest areas that we have many areas here, but we have recovered some at the area closer to Spain. Regarding forest species, these are the main forest types that we have in Portugal. Basically, the maritime pine, the Pinus pinaster, Eucalyptus globulus plantations, the sweet chestnuts, the cork oak and the holm oaks, essentially what we call the montados, the stone pines. This line here, typically the south area of Portugal, and here the quercus areas of Pirnaic and Peduculate oak that also occur, and we have also some areas of other conifers like Douglas fir and so on. This is a map of the distribution of these forest species according to those points that I've shown you. In blue, there are the eucalyptus plantations. In green, you see essentially the maritime pine areas. Here in the coast are the forest state forests, state forests. You find it here and here also. And this, well, has different colors, but you can see it's cork and holm oak, that's basically in the south. And this reddish information are chestnuts, other broadleaves, quercus, that's more concentrated here in the north of the country and in some areas in the center. This is a graphic depicting the change of cover regarding these three species. As I've mentioned, we have the top three species. That's maritime pine, eucalyptus, and cork. And their relative importance has changed over time, and this was a period where they have competed in this ranking, and they have changed positions considerably. maritime pine is in a very severe process of diminishing. The cork basically stays in the same position, and eucalyptus plantation has gone get some of these areas. There are many explanations, many things that can be said about this. Basically, in maritime pine, we have to consider the diseases regarding the species. That's a problem affecting, and it's an area that's been also very affected by the forest fires in Portugal. This is the old oak that's also very stabilized, and then there's around here the stone pine. It's this green one that's got some area during this period, essentially in those areas that I've mentioned previously. Now, focusing more on desertification. If we have this information at national level, we can also compute this type of statistics for the desertification affected areas. Basically, it's a simple procedure. We cross the information on those photo points with the aridity index here, and we are here considering the semi-arid and dry subhumid areas, and are computing here the statistics for these areas. This is Portugal, continental Portugal total. That's the area on desertification affected areas for each three species. One interesting thing to remark here is that there are some species or species groups that are characteristic of these areas. Basically, cork and olm oak are almostly 100% within desertification affected areas. Also has carob trees and stone pine. The others, like eucalyptus, maritime pine, they appear on these desertification areas but are less more frequent. So if we consider about actions regarding controlling desertification, we are talking about some specific species, not the all species that presented in the country. This type of trends can also be computed for the desertification affected areas. I'll just show you an example about land use. We have here is the decrease on forest area. That's also detected in this area. But somehow even compensated by those increase on new plantations in the south. There's a significant decrease on croplands and a significant increase on shrublands and grassland areas in this period. This is just an example. Everything that I've shown previously can be done and computed to this area with the relevance that can be directly compared. So you're not strict conditioning your analysis just to the certified areas. You know the entire country, you know the areas that are certified, and you can compare, make indices of everything. Everything is fully compatible. It's just an example of one thing that I won't go into detail, but since we have these 3 moments of time analysis, we can compute a land cover transition matrix. So in the main diagonal, here you have 1995, so in here is the total area of 1995 for maritime pine, eucalyptus, cork oak, and here you have 2010, and that's the total area of this in 2010. In the main diagonal area, you have the area that remained unchanged, and you can then see the areas that have changed from pine tree to eucalyptus, 78,000 hectares, but there's also on the reverse areas, the areas that there were eucalyptus and then go for pine trees. So it's from there you can compute a lot of indices, made very different analysis and answer many questions like this: if eucalyptus are taking the space of pine trees, what is the areas that in areas that have been burned, what has been the change of forest cover. So this is a new information that we didn't have in the past, and it's very important for computing indices and making analysis on land cover as a whole, and also identification indices approaches. It's information that's available and can be directly used. For phase 2 of the National Forest Inventory, we are going to the field. That's field dendrometric and vegetation measuring process. We are planning the 2,000 plots on forests and shrublands, where many indicators will be produced based on collected information, like standing volume by tree species, the characterization of stands composition, age, stocking level, the carbon stock and sink at different pools in the air parts, and the root level, in the leaves. Everything will be computed and can be then disaggregated at that levels that I've shown you previously. We're also collecting information on non-wood forest products like cork, resin, and fruits, namely on holm oaks situations. Collecting data on biodiversity. Basically, it's data on habitats, but I'll show you that in a moment. We are characterizing each of these plots on a full model. I don't know if you are acquainted with this approach. It's a type of classification of the vegetation regarding its behave in terms of fire propagation. And then we can, if we have collected this information, we can produce maps of fire risk, fire propagation risk, whatever. Soil erosion, basically the signs of in the field, in these plots, if you have loss of soil. It's not. It's basically on visual indicators. It's not a very quantitative approach. It's a combined process. It's not a specific process for this. On biodiversity indicators, we are attempting for the first time in each of the plots identification of the habitat that's present following the EU Habitats Directive. And for that we have developed a classification tree for the field crews to identify which habitat, if they are in an habitat, which habitat is that, and the status of conservation of that habitat. Also, habitat threats and vulnerabilities are also identified in each of the plots. The quantification of alien tree species or tree or vegetation species are identified in each plot. It's also information that can contribute for the indicators on certification. Tree-level wildlife indicators like nests, cavities that can be identified in the field are recorded and registered in a formal process. And we also have a characterization of vegetation structural diversity. That's basically the scheme that we are here. We've divided the plot in different height stratons and then identify the percents of vegetation, and we can compute a model of the structure of vegetation. So we try to go beyond the species approaches and go more to a vegetation formation approach. This is also collected on paper sheet field forms, but then it's introduced on a web-based platform that validates all the information that's collected, so that the data is completely consistent and free of errors. It's the first time that we are doing it this way. Phase 3, it's a new phase on NFI context. It's the first time that will be doing a soil carbon evaluation or soil evaluation. The purpose is to collect in a set of plots soil samples. For that, we adopt the Biosoils project, the EU project that defines some standards on how things should be done, and that's the strategies that we are applying. And although there are not many point samples, but the number of soil samples it's incredibly huge, because these methodological approaches require many samples to stabilize for each point to be properly characterized. These soil samples will be preserved in a soil library. Indicators on soil carbon stock by forest and cropland types, it's the main purpose of this analysis, but many other analyses can be done from these samples, that since they are preserved for future use. It's also a basis for production of soil carbon cartography. That's a general distribution of these plots that will cover not only forest soils but also agricultural soils. Some of them already have some previous measurements that have been done. The thing here, the most important here, is that we have to collect some undisturbed samples in many of these plots, so that everything can be calculated or computed in a proper manner. And that's the main effort, is these undisturbed samples that most of the times are forgotten. The parameters, it's the standard ones. We have divided these samples on 3 layers: the surface layer, and then 2 layers of depth, where information on bulk density, texture, soil reaction, and so on. I'm not a soil specialist, I'm just compiling this information. But the idea is to collect the standard parameters, so that can be used for calculating many different indexes and so on. And basically, it's what I had to show you. You can have some further information from the ICNF website, where these results on areas are presented. It's in Portuguese, I'm sorry. We plan to have a future release on English. You can also have my email if you need any contact or any information. Feel free to contact me. It's no problem at all.